record it. We'll try it.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Chug Life Podcast. We have a super special episode. Getting drunk with Zach on the couch in my room. It's fucking lit.
Hell yeah.
I'm not getting drunk. But Yinglings are out. We do have a ridiculously important story to go over. And it's actually, like, if I'm being honest with you, like, we've done a fuck ton of episodes on shit. Alright? So many episodes. But this is, like, ultimately and by far the most important that I could ever imagine. And I'm sure, maybe there's going to be more dumb shit down the road. But this isn't by any means just one of his fuck ups, or one of those he didn't know what he was doing. No, fuck all that. All right, he is entirely complicit, and ladies and gentlemen, I have like the best fucking guest to go over this with. All right, my brother Zach.
Hello.
So today we're gonna be going over the story of a few people who have been interned by the U.S. government and sent abroad to some prison. And we're going to be talking about a very big and, in my opinion, nasty story. So, this is not for the meek-hearted. We're going to be discussing torture and forced deportation, abductings, kidnapping style stuff. And we're, of course, discussing ICE and their handling of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. And
Can you pause it? I have all my talking points right here. I was looking. All right. And as well as Mahmoud Khalil, who is a Palestinian activist. Student activist at that.
that's Mahmoud, dude. Mahmoud Khalil. Mahmoud.
Yeah, and he is a student activist who giving a pro-Palestinian message, while those who comprehend that Palestinians and Hamas are completely fucking different people, terrorist organization versus literal citizens. Either way, insanity.
So I will be bringing you guys the story of Kilmar, and Zach will bring you the story of Mahmoud. And of course, this is by no means meant to be a biography or an autobiography of any sorts. This is merely trying to present the dangers of what this president means. And I'm not talking about precedent, Trump. We're talking about a precedent, a law-setting move that can generate a means for the court and for lawyers to be able to finagle their way around explaining this to judges and eventually having to deal with the judge. Because as you'll learn, it's not so easy to just kind of bullshit your way through sending a U.S. citizen overseas and then saying, well, we can't get them. So, a little bit about this place. This place is called CECOT. And what that means is the Centro de detainment del terrorismo. And even, I'm struggling to say that right now. It might be the Yingling, but I don't know.
At least you're a better Hispanic than I am. Jesus.
The wording for this is fucking wild. Okay? And what that means is it's a center for terrorists. Okay? It's a center for confining terrorists. Right? So keep that in mind. Confining. And when you think about this, I want you to also consider what the U.S. prison system treats those words as, right? We know that they're subjected to borderline slavery positions of work. And sometimes they're in labor positions that they're paid for pennies on the dollar for. But does that mean that there's also death and killing introduced within the system? And if so, does that still make it a confinement center? Is it now just a concentration camp?
It's a labor camp, right?
So to an extent, it's not a labor camp is the position here, because these guys
Forced
don't
labor.
do anything. For 24 hours on the day, they are locked in a center. For I think they have about an hour where it is highly supervised, and they have absolutely no access to cell phones calling. They don't have access to their family members. So as far as we go, when we're talking about the story of a U.S. citizen from Maryland who has no criminal record, has been here since 2011, he came here illegally, but he eventually became a U.S. citizen. So what we're talking about is literally a U.S. citizen being ripped from the hands of a family, 3 kids, his wife, and a union position, then sending him to a hardcore terrorist confinement, quote unquote, place.
Just for being an immigrant.
Literally. And so at the end of the day, you have to contend with the fact that maybe, just maybe, it's something that's systematically designed for something else. Because in the photos that we get, and within a lot of the Google images that you can find of the place, it is specifically just, you see these blots of red that stand out within this image of just buildings. And you kind of have to go, well, what is that? So you scroll in, right? You zoom in because just your curiosity gets the best of you. And lo and behold, it is just a pile of red, brownish, just rubbish. Just, it looks like blood and guts just stuffed on piles on piles. And this is meant to be confinement, by the way. So if we consider that, okay, at the worst possible case, maybe some of the statisticians like to say that within these deportations, you'll have 10% that will be, quote unquote, good ones. Consider that at the end of the day, if those good ones are sent to the same place and have to deal with the same consequences as, quote, the bad ones, what does that mean for all of us? If at the end of the day you could just be picked apart with no criminal record, no seeming objection aside the fact that you came here from another country.
Most importantly, no due process whatsoever.
None. You're not going to get a single shot with the eyes of the law until eventually some judge is, awoken from the slumber and they're forced to come to terms with that fact that we sent a citizen to a place for terrorists, and the response from the White House is by far the most expected thing, but also you kind of hope they didn't do it. You hope that maybe they had a come to God moment and they had one good day out of the many bad. Nope. They come out, they call him a terrorist, they say he's with the MS-13, all because the dude filed asylum for being afraid of the gangs back home where he was sent. He was literally, basically sent to the prison with all the guys he was afraid of and the reason that he had left the country in the first place.
That gets rid of the whole point.
Like, it's
of asylum.
Unreal. Like, if there is no reason for them doing it correct, what is the point of even being on file? At the end of the day, you're just giving more righteous claim to the guys that came here legally and aren't on the books, because then they're not going to get fucking zeroed on by these guys, and they're not going to get blindsided. You know, can you imagine the look on his wife finding out that her husband is on a flight to El Salvador?
And it gets scarier because, like, you could even be a U.S. citizen, a green card holder. If you look different, ICE has what's called a quota now. And with those quotas, they're basically told, take a number of brown people and put them here.
I got a treat for you. Okay, so what we've got is a list that ICE uses to basically get all of the people that the White House has deemed to basically fit, you know, a certain kind of layout of what they're basically going after gang members, right? But this is just like, it's so broad that I want you to keep in mind that they were going after gang members. Okay? So when you think about it, and as I'm reading out all of this shit, that is basically a point system that if you have, I believe, what was it, 10 or 12 or some shit? God, I should know that.
Jeez, that's rough.
Okay, if 8 points or higher for an alien from the symbolism, determined by their value. Okay. So basically, if you have 8 points or more on this, you're validated to be a TDA member, which means they can just deport your ass. And the TDA is the people that they claimed were terrorists and that they put on the terrorist thing. So the whole thing is, if any of these three requirements are not satisfied, the person named above shall not be ordered removed under the Alien Enemies Act. In such a case, you should consult your supervisor and office of the principal legal advisor, U.S. Immigration, blah, 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 and remove their ass. You could start removing their ass if they're basically, as long as that person is Venezuelan, is 14 or older, and they have 8 of these points, good to go. All right. Now, what these 8 points could be, all right, you could have been convicted of, you know, as a criminal. Now, here's what that literally says. Subject has been convicted of violating Title 18 or any other federal or state law criminalizing or imposing civil penalties for activity related to TDA. So, I'm not going to get into Title 18 because I just want to continue to go through this really quickly.
That's a whole other fucking subject.
There's a lot of shit here. But basically, what they're saying is, if this person has any criminal record and they're Venezuelan, okay, you could take them. Okay, they're not going to look at it. No judge is going to persecute this because they have a criminal record. Okay, and keep that in mind as you're going through all this shit. Basically, if you have any court records, any indictments, any sentencing, any criminal complaints, and you were previously identified or you were described to be with any of these guys, okay? So it starts off really broad, okay? And then soon enough, it just goes out into literally whatever, like, relations, anything, okay, according to this.
But then it makes you think, the relations, are those people part of their family?
Keep in mind, all of this stuff is stuff they use on a U.S. citizen.
Yes.
So, in theory, if this is something, when it says as he's identifying as a subject member of the TDA. You could literally just grab that, and if one day Trump decides he wants to throw up an executive order stating that CNN media is a terrorist organization, send that bitch off. Literally, he could write up another order for ICE to just prosecute this and reword it.
Well, and see, here's the thing: is I can tell you, coming from a Jewish family, is that there's more motive than one. There's multiple motives. We know that.
Well, we got to talk about somebody, friend of the pod, notorious friend of the pod, Stephen Miller. All right. He is the guy behind all of this. I have no doubt. This is his playbook, in my opinion. You have a president who previously, like, his whole shtick for almost 6 months was just rallying immigration, okay? Remember, they're eating your dogs, okay? Remember that whole
They're
shtick.
eating your dogs, they're eating your cats. You wouldn't believe this, people. Oh, my God.
At the end of the day, you got to realize how far they're going to go. And this is the end of the road, because we're going to be talking about another kind of pressure point to this whole thing is when the White House specifically goes and the press secretary, Kat Leavitt, goes and speaks about them being terrorists and being MS-13 members. It immediately kind of shows you really for who they are.
It's crazy, though.
It's just unreal.
And there's people like me who have members of my family who are, like, literally kings. So you think about it. Well, yeah. And so you think about it. I'm affiliated because of family. I'm white and Hispanic. What's the chance of this little point system that doesn't actually take a person at face value, but it sees what they want to see?
If these, consider this is the thing that's really mind-boggling.
Because there are like people who are Puerto Ricans who are American citizens.
Exactly.
Who are they're not getting deported, but they're getting put in these camps.
Think about the fact,
like yourself,
that
you're fucking Puerto Rican, dude.
Yeah. Think about the fact that if they could do this, right, and no judge comes in at the end of the day and puts a stop to this, and there is no actual judicial, checks and balances to happen here, because at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very happy to tell you all that while the executive could take a shit, all right, and while all of the legislative could take a shit, you still have another one, and it's the best one, my favorite, as Donald Trump would say, judicial. And it is the most powerful. I'm going to be frank here. The best part about this is that when they come down hard. And typically what that means is, in the span of the last couple of days, we've seen Trump see a lot of pushback, even from the Supreme Court, issuing a 9-0 order to basically reaffirm what the district court had said, which was that they had to facilitate Kilmar coming back to the U.S. Now, that was before the president of El Salvador had came to the U.S., sat in the Oval Office, and basically told them, I can't fucking do anything I'm just a fucking guy, dude. I'm just, bro.
He labeled him a terrorist.
Dude, I'm just some fucking guy, all right? I just do some crypto on the side, man. This whole president thing, bro, not really fucking with me, man. You got to talk to the warden. Actually, the warden, he's actually the president. I forgot to tell you that. That's
makes you
the
question
gist.
if he's still alive.
Well, here's the thing.
That's speculation.
Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't? Because we haven't gotten there. But why wouldn't you just put out a video with this guy? You know, put out a message with this guy. I don't know. But here's the thing. In au contraire, is that all of these guys that are quote unquote terrorists that are with him in these cells, because these are huge, almost 50 to 100 people cells.
Well, we've seen the pictures of those people out there.
And, at the end of the day, it's very difficult, I'm assuming, for that to get through the political bureaucracy. And I don't think that any of the guys within the prison system would be aware of this bullshit, quote unquote. And they wouldn't be aware to have photos or videos or, create that kind of idea within themselves. And I don't think Trump wants to. I don't think Bukele wants to. I think that within these prison systems, it's dog eat dog. And you have a fuck ton of hardened gang members being exposed to, guys that were living, there's one guy that's absolutely heartbreaking. He was like the gay hair styler, and he also got wrapped up in this. And there's even a photo of them shaving his fucking head off, and he's just praying. He's crying. He's absolute. I can't imagine what he must be going through. And putting them with all of these hardened quote-unquote terrorists, MS-13 members, I can't imagine what that ends up being like.
Well, and not to mention within the culture, it's pretty well known being homosexual is not looked well upon.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, even we can say, in
now,
a lot of homelands, it's not looked well upon. That's fine.
Let's consider something that's in just a whole other world really quickly. What would retribution look like?
Dethroning Donald Trump. In terms of retribution for the people who have
Why
suffered.
not invade El Salvador?
Huh?
Invade El Salvador, man.
What purpose would... so you have to see it through their view. They think they're getting rid of criminals. They're getting rid of waste, fraud, abuse, blah, blah, blah. They're not. What they're doing is they're straw manning. They're finding somebody else to blame it on. And that is the whole basis of that party itself, is finding somebody else to blame. And what that does is that allows them to pass policy that hurts other people. Generally minorities, people who are of, any descent that isn't them. Even though we are in a country in itself that is not strictly white. We formed this ourselves. We colonized. We came here. I can say this is, it's just a different scenario. So what we can and can't say is kind of weird, because it feels like there's a level of censorship. Because Mahmoud Khalil, like in an example, you speak for a nation and you're a terrorist. You speak for a nation versus people itself, or you speak out against billionaires. You could look at the Elon Musk thing going on. The Elon Musk thing going on is insane.
That is wild, man.
Like, they're looking at people who are burning cars into being terrorists. He's not an elected official.
Mm-hmm.
How is that terrorism? Yeah. Oh, he's advising. Advising is not a fucking elected official. He doesn't get the say on that. Trump shouldn't get the say on that. And honestly, we are so partisan at this point that we don't have an option. And then you've got RFK, who's had ideas for special needs internment camps. Like, I have a nonverbal autistic son, and he thinks that vaccines are the cause for autism. No, motherfuckers. The older generation of y'all just put them in homes and gave them lobotomies and said, good enough.
Well, I do think it's also, just in my opinion, with how that developed, with how people, how we quote unquote ended up finding out people had more autism and more, Down syndrome and all of these, just because we were able to test better. We were able to, and more people were able to get tested as well. Distribution of healthcare and all of these things that needed to be accessible to diagnose them. Um, that's that's what's changed, and people like RFK seem to not be able to grasp that aspect.
That's correlation versus causation, and it's one of the finest examples because what I can say as somebody who works in the medical field is that a lot of those medications and vaccines that we see are not just published by the United States. So it's not just the government. This is like the world's top scientists come together. They decide, okay, what is healthy here? Not every vaccine within its first run is going to be amazing, but you look at things like polio, measles, anything of that sort. Measles is making a comeback without a fucking doubt.
Texas, dude, Texas shit is wild.
And what is, I mean, specifically speaking, Southern Texas, politically, where do they stand?
Super conservative, for sure.
Southern Texas, yes.
I get what you mean.
So, like, a lot of those are giving ideas to, like, anti-vax folks. They're not actually giving statistics, data. They're going off of man who published articles who literally had his medical license revoked. So to me, all of their theories are just completely debunked. They just want something to blame. And to be honest with you, there were some bad policies back in, the 70s, 60s, hell, even 50s, where I can understand that people have distrust towards the medical system itself, but these are tried and true vaccines. These have eradicated these diseases, these structures, and they have eradicated a lot of things that were really bad for our society. People used to be in iron lungs. And even funnier, the RFK family, they have literally put children who were different in homes until they came up with the perfect children to politically represent them. Oh, and the funny thing is, not one of them was RFK.
Oh, boy.
And they have completely denounced him.
Ladies and gentlemen, to get back on track really quickly. So, as we were saying earlier about the judicial system, specifically backing up, is Judge Paula Zinnes. And she is a district judge who has affirmed the order that we were previously talking about, that the Supreme Court backed up. And she's the one that's going to be leading the charge here, it seems. What that means is that there will be a lot of subpoenas, and eventually there will be a lot of attempts to get higher Trump administration officials into the courts. And maybe somebody will divulge some information and perjure themselves and see some prison time, but generally this doesn't end up being a big deal. Now, difference of the matter is that there's never been a U.S. citizen sent abroad to a confinement camp. And especially if they find out he's dead, because this is where it gets really juicy, really juicy. So congressmen and representatives are getting really pissed off, okay? Because nobody wants to talk about this guy. The White House is saying, oh, he's a terrorist, and his congressmen are like, dude, I was with his grieving wife and 3 kids. What in the fuck are you talking about? So they want to know more. The White House, of course, is bullshitting. And what that ends up kind of leading to is a pissed off congressman. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm unsure if I have any listeners here that are going to be this old, but once upon a very long time ago, there was a guy named Jim Jones. Okay, he was a little batshit.
He had bad punchlines.
He was fucking nuts and decided to take a fuck ton of people to a very far away place called Guyana. Okay? What ended up happening was some senator had heard about it, and he said, "What in the fuck are a bunch of my people from Iowa doing in Guyana?" Okay? No. So, and of course, this is all just backed up by people reaching out to him going, "Dude, why is my sister going into some forest with some African guy? What the fuck?" So they all go over there. He gets them back. Okay, and of course, we all know how that ended. But it just goes to show the power of what one pissed off senator can do. At this point, we're at about 5 and counting. And what does this mean? Okay. I want to kind of portray the bigger picture here of a highly devised plan to send some U.S. citizen that just nobody would fucking know about. Some random dude, immigrant, just from, buttfuck nowhere, whatever. We'll send him out to buttfuck nowhere, blah, blah. Just to see what the political ramifications would be. Just to see, can we do this? Okay? Now, I want to portray you another one. Okay? It's a lot simpler. And at the end of the day, you kind of think about it twice and you go, then, no. Okay? These ICE guys that ended up responding to a shoddy police work report on this guy. And by this guy, I'm talking about Kilmar. Go, pick him up, and eventually he's deported. And the Trump administration has zero idea, no clue. It's just all wrapped up in paperwork. And at the end of the day, it's all just chalked up as one more terrorist, one more gangster, one more, cartel member, whatever, sent away. That is where I'm leaning in this equation. And mostly because that's just kind of how Trump has really played a lot of his foreign policy. And here's what we're going to kind of discuss a little bit further into his foreign policy, specifically with Bukele. Now, as we discussed, Bukele is the president of El Salvador. Okay? Bukele is super rich, but he's only super rich in crypto. All right? Now, let me tell you guys about somebody who recently got into crypto and recently got super, super rich with crypto. All right? Our very president, Donald J. Trump.
Hell, he even launched his own crypto coin.
Oh, yeah, dude.
Within the office.
Filthy rich.
Well,
filthy rich, bro.
Many of other commemorative items that got him even
He's
richer.
got gold coins. You can get a photo of him getting shot that was artwork, whatever, done, painted, fucking who cares. It's hung up in the White House.
You know what's crazy is 2016, outside of his stocks, he was considered cash poor.
Well, I mean, he still is considered cash poor. Let's be honest here. If Bitcoin were to crash tomorrow, he wouldn't be any better for it.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, let's be honest here, he's probably cashed out at this point. And he's probably made a good couple million, couple $100 million. But he's still pretty in debt. And,
way more than the average American citizen will ever see.
Well, we're going to be discussing a transaction between Bukele and Trump and a kind of money for prisoner swap. And this is kind of another kind of wrench in the plans, is that when this money swap happens eventually, they end up finding out that, holy shit, we don't have as many people as we need. There's only, 20, 25 of these MS-13 members. Let's start rounding up a bunch of these citizens that maybe people won't find, people won't know about, people won't care about. And that is how we wind up in the situation of Kilmar getting sent to El Salvador, and Mahmoud getting sent to El Salvador. Where was he sent?
believe
you gotta
he was...
you gotta find out if he was sent to El Salvador as well. Shit, I gotta make sure I'm correct on that.
I'm pretty sure he was just sent to a labor camp, but
Because I know they said some guys. This is the thing about Stephen fucking Miller, dude. He went on Fox the other day, and somebody asked him if Gitmo was still rolling. He was like, "Yep, still full in operation, man." So I'm pretty sure they may be sending some people to Gitmo, dude. And that is a horrifying idea.
yeah, no, it's a terrible, terrible, terrible world we're seeing right now. Like, there's no due process for any immigrant, even if they are a legal citizen at this point. I mean, I wish there were more words to understand, but basically what I've known from here is Mahmoud Khalil. He's basically being held captive against his will while on a student visa. But it's against the rights of its people. You know, like, we come here wanting to live the American dream.
Oh, he's in Louisiana. Okay,
Yeah,
I remember a bit. I believe he was from He needs to be in like a Massachusetts. He was like from up north.
Yeah.
And they moved him to Louisiana so they could get a more like hardcore son of a bitch type judge.
Well, yeah, and that's what they do, is they move south.
They did that, I believe, with
They do that for
too.
every case. I mean, you go and if you look through the court systems, anybody that wants to be unfair, for like trademark, copyright, I know this is off subject, but trademark, copyright, anything of that sort, they go to Texas. They send somebody to a Texas court. And so, how I know this is there's two different guitar companies. There's Dean Guitars and there's Gibson. Gibson wasn't happy because Dean had a Les Paul style shaped guitar. Gibson sent Dean to a Texas court. Dean is based in Texas, yes, but like, that's the most unfair part where your court system is like rigged.
Yeah, the laws are so ass backwards that they probably don't even have laws that cover that as rudimentary.
They do, but they're more in favor of the person filing the suit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so like, and it makes sense for Louisiana. There's just so many different varying factors in this scenario itself. The only people that hurt are the American citizens themselves. I mean, you give a quota, you tell those people, I mean, like, you give cops a quota, we saw what happened. They had to take that away. You give a immigration officer that quota, they're going to find any reason at all to detain, deport, or even dispose of a person.
Oh, man. So, as I mentioned earlier, ladies and gentlemen, this conversation is kind of meant to argue about the idea that the slippery slope we're currently on may end up having some type of boulder that's on top of it as you're going down, and it's the federal government. Now, I'm not going to tell you how to prepare. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I feel like, being that about 90% of my viewership is American, you're well aware. But I also want you all to vocally express yourselves. And at the end of the day, don't be feeling like you're forced to either. You know, we all do our part how we do it.
But it is encouraged that you help.
Yeah, at the end of the day, any help is appreciated. But I do want to leave you guys with a bit of hope with the judicial system doing its part. In the coming days, I'm sure we'll see a bit of escalation from the judge, moving to bring in some of the members from the administration and maybe get proof of life. And I'm sure from the pressure that Congress and, the members within will do.
Showing up for those town halls.
Sure enough, at some point, the pressure, because I've already seen his wife on TV. They fucking Newsmax had her, dude. It was crazy.
It's bad when platforms like
it
Newsmax.
Is bad when Newsmax is giving airtime to that, because here you got to keep in mind all the other stuff. I mean, Trump has shot the bed so many guys. It's April, okay? It's fucking April, man, and we're not even 3 months into this shit, man. Just consider that, okay? And this is by far the biggest, most disastrous, because of just look at how they react to it, okay? When they put that much ugliness, just look at how they did Luigi Mangione, all right? We don't even know if the fucking guy did the shit, all right? The guy didn't even have his fucking trial, bro, and he was already, like, the news had fucking persecuted the motherfucker like we've never seen, all right?
Which is crazy because he, as a representative to, well, I wouldn't want to say representative, he as a person has, more people have agreed with his actions on both sides of the aisle than a lot of the politicians we're seeing.
He hit, listen.
A lot of Ben Shapiro's following left.
If you want to think about how much of an effect he had on modern culture versus quite literally anything within the Nazi-esque, fascist-esque sphere, it's fucking miles ahead. Like, it's people rallied around him in such a way that you could only compare it to fucking Donald Trump on the right.
Well, and so here's the thing is, like, we see a lot of do-nothing Democrats these days. We see a lot of people who have lost hope in the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
It's steering a lot more of our citizens of, like, far-left policy.
Well, look how they did fucking Joe, dude. They did Joe that fucking dirty just to have Trump do the same shit.
Who? Joe?
Joe Biden, brother. They did. Oh, he's old. He's demented, and Trump's the same fucking way, man. He's not any better, man.
Yeah, but
at all.
I think the best way to deal with, like, policy itself is to not look at left, right, as opposed to moral, right? You look at arguments. If you get in an argument with a person who is inherently Republican, what they are going to do is they're going to start projecting, well, Joe Biden did this, they did that. And so it turns into this left and right argument versus moral.
Crazy idea. Okay. Bernie gets into the Democratic Party.
Bernie's already in. Well, he's independent right now.
Yeah.
He's too old.
Come on, don't be facetious. Card carrying. Weight behind him.
I mean, like, we talking like president? I mean, he was already part of the treasury for Joe Biden's administration, so, I mean, he could have been a...
Look, he's somebody that he's got the bona fides. You put him in the position, he's gonna fucking kick it. But you don't want him as president.
I mean, I
would,
but...
Look.
It aligns closer to my ideal policy versus what we had with the Democratic Party.
VP has enough pull on policy.
Yes.
And if you already have somebody within the same area of pull, we're talking about voters here.
Okay. And
you know, we're like, sure, we're gonna, at some point, we're gonna split on policy, but we're not going hard line.
well,
We're not talking about an AOC Bernie ticket.
that'd be sick.
How many years we got left on AOC?
A lot.
Yeah.
We don't got a lot left on
Yeah.
Bernie.
Well, that's the problem here. So within the faction, because we've had this conversation before, within the faction itself, you have Newsom. You have
No,
Beto,
Newsom is a fucking...
you have Beto O'Rourke. I know Newsom's a fucking
No. Rourke and Newsom, they are... And I hate saying this, they are very Zionist in idea. And people, when they hear that word, they freak the fuck out. They're like, you're anti-Semitic. I'm part fucking Jewish.
Well,
you can fucking suck my dick on this. But what I'm saying...
Zionism's pretty fucking nuts.
Yes. And so,
Like the whole, like, Israel is the best, fuck everybody else type bullshit.
it's insane.
Yeah.
And they're occupying a territory that isn't theirs, and then they're being treated like victims. Israel, Hamas, let's get this out the window. Hamas is terrible. They're a terrorist organization. Everybody recognizes that. But once you critique Israel, you're anti-Semitic. I'm fucking Jewish. I don't know what the fuck to say about that.
Within our previous episodes, we've had quite a few discussions about that distinction. Just mostly...
Yeah, but that's the thing is a lot of the Democratic Party stands with Israel on these things. You know, you look at Joe Biden, you look at Kamala Harris.
Even Trump himself.
Yeah.
So,
And what do those people have in common? Big money interest.
consider the opposite then.
Okay.
All right. You have somebody who has no money. They try to get into politics.
Okay.
Maybe you have the best policy on earth, but you have no way to promote yourself. You're not going to be able to buy yourself on the ticket.
Well, that's kind of like... If you can't buy yourself on the ticket, then you can't be part of...
But that's the way the system's set up. You have to buy yourself on the ticket.
It's not always true. You look at how Bernie ran in the primaries back in the day. It was a grassroots system with every person doing a $28. Now, I know this sounds weird and conspiracy-like, and the left and right, they both agree on this, is when it comes to primaries, the party itself kind of has a choice in who they pick.
Yeah.
Like, they can say, well, I'll shut down polls over here, but I mean, that's no different from the right. They're known for voter suppression. You're looking at the SAFE Act.
I mean, but we're not still talking within, the same realm of having a candidate.
Yes,
we're.
But the thing is
The primary is a whole different ballgame. We're gonna have
the primary is what decides who has the candidate. Who is the candidate? And if big money interest decides they don't want a candidate, it's very possible that they can decide where they want to put and who they want to put in. They chose 8 different candidates. And let's be honest, Joe Biden mostly got through name recognition. Because he was part of the Obama administration.
Yeah.
And look how that went.
I mean,
it just made more people angry.
I'm gonna be honest with you, man. I'm a Joe Biden stan to this day. Fuck with what he did.
I can't for the Israel policy.
Yes, of course, he, like many other presidents, it's just something we can't fucking get rid of. But the support he gave to Ukraine was literally fundamental in Russia getting its nose broken in.
I don't disagree with that.
I think that history will see that, and we'll see it very clearly. And unfortunately, it's not going to be very kind to him now because of the people in power and the persecution of his, members of administration, people that worked for him, people that prosecuted Trump. They're being persecuted. And you have to kind of harken back to when they cried about being wrongly persecuted, and they're going to jail for just having a walk in front of the Capitol. These fucking people, man, they all bitched about this shit, and now they're doing it.
So you have to take into consideration that a broken clock is right 2 times in a day. Right?
Explain further.
Okay. So you can be right on one policy and you can be way the fuck off on one other.
Alright.
So what I'm stating here is that you can be on the right side of history somewhere. Joe Biden's support for Ukraine was amazing. I agree wholeheartedly. That's our ally. We don't cuddle up to Russia and most dictators. I love that idea and I'm here for it. However, supporting Israel over
he shat the bed in a lot of places. We're gonna go down this really quickly because in particular how we fucked over the Peshmerga, how we fucked over the YPG. We completely abandoned people that demolished ISIS in Turkey and Syria. And eventually we let them just get bombed by the Russians and the Turkish. And eventually we thanked the Turkish for doing all of this. And God willing, these people are still alive in the mountains of Rojava somewhere or in Syria. Who knows? But we did those folks so dirty. And it's not, maybe let's give just a ick of a benefit of the doubt in the situation that maybe he didn't know exactly what he was doing, but it is the fact that we were complicit in that. We knew the Russians were active in Syria. We knew that Assad was still active and he was still bombing his people. And in just as a matter of fact, they were also bombing our allies. These literally, we were boots on ground allies, bro. Just to kind of put it into contrast that he has had great successes with his foreign policy, but this is also kind of where we're contrasting him with Donald Trump completely shitting the bed. He supported Israel further. He stopped supporting Ukraine. He's actually kind of cuddled up more with Putin. We've sent an envoy to Moscow who shook hands with Putin, fucking smiled at him, put his hand on his heart like a little bitch, walked behind him like a little bitch.
It gets weirder, man, because he was like buddies with President Xi, and now he wants to throw giant tariffs.
Man,
it's inconsistent behavior.
His thinking process. It's brutal, dude.
And I will tell you this: I have a master's in psychology, so I can actually break this down for you. It's called narcissism. And with narcissism, if somebody kisses his ass, he wants to give them the world. Yeah. I mean, you look at what Putin and him are doing. Oh yeah, Putin will look like he's kissing his ass, but he's got him around his little fucking finger.
Well, let's also consider the fact that we've long known, okay? So, but Trump has a Russian code name.
Well,
the FSB has actually, back in during the fall of the Soviet Union, that whole shtick, they had a bunch of files that got released into the world. And lo and behold, we find out they have one on Donald Trump. Okay, we learn about his code name, and eventually, this theory that maybe, just maybe, Donald Trump had a rough night in Moscow. And the FSB knows this, they have a file, and, well, why wouldn't you want to give that guy the world then?
So I think backtracking in terms of people thinking partisan, bipartisan, what works for them, I think people should be taking more of a moral option to decide who their candidate should be. And this is why we're in this mess, is because it's left and right. It's not right and wrong. And so you could say, oh, well, this is the lesser of two evils. You have a third party option. And I know, and I'm aware that third party options are basically, to a lot of Democrats, a throwaway vote, and to a lot of people on the right are a throwaway vote. But this is where we're wrong in history. Do you know how many we've actually had independent presidents before? Until we got to see a lot of the partisan media come around and give their opinions on everything. But like, I don't know, I feel like supporting one and then dismissing the really bad, it's not the way, because like, oh, well, I want Ukraine to do well, but I guess I'll support the Zionists while I'm at it. That seems insane to me. So like, while I feel like Joe Biden is the better option, or Kamala Harris may have been the better option over Trump, in fact, I know we're not going to see any progress in the United States in any sort of way because the Democrats haven't done anything to benefit the citizens but their donors. And so when we see moments where Trump throws these fits and he gets into these modes where he's, blaming Democrats and passing these laws, and none of the Democrats, the Chuck Schumers, they have all the same fucking donors. So when you take them at face value, they turn around and they don't fight it because they have the same donors. So the first goal should be to get money out of politics, because those members of the House, the Senate, the Congress, anything, they're going to go with whatever their moneyed interest and lobbyists are telling them to do. I know I'm seeming like I'm a fucking hippie at this point, but like, money and interest has a big grasp on our current political climate.
Oh yeah, we can thank Citizens United for that shit.
Yeah, but it's on the left and it's on the right, so you have to choose morally right. Not the right, but morally right. Find your person, pick them, make sure your state representative is the right person for you, because by the end of the day, you are the one who chooses and decides to find the morally just person. We cannot always know and see who the morally just person is, but by the end of the day, at least you chose right for what you felt was right.
True shit, brother. And ladies and gentlemen, that has been this episode of the Chug of Life podcast. I thank you all for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed it. And you guys have a good one.
Peace.